A salute to the superintendent's office, Ron Stevens especially, and the Berkeley County Board of Education, too, led by Pat Murphy and Jackie Long, the president and the vice president, and the other members as well, Melissa Power, Michael Martin, Damon Wright, because the ability to get information out with this superintendent and this Board of Education far surpasses any cooperation that I've gotten in the past. We had periodic appearances by superintendents, which were always appreciated, and were then very much so. The Board of Education was not nearly as eager to come on the air and talk about issues, especially things like this when they would happen. And the superintendent always had to be scheduled very well in advance. Mr. Stevens has been very transparent in coming on this program, and so have the Board of Education members. And we are very grateful for that, and I know the public is too, because it was one of the big complaints a couple of years ago was the lack of transparency in the Berkeley County school system. That is not the case with this group here, and it's very much appreciated. And Mike, I know you can't comment because of the work that your law firm does.
Well, I would say, yes, that's a good thing to hear.
I'd also like to comment real quick. I have a nephew that lives with me that attends as a junior at Hedgesville High School, and I went and picked him up yesterday when I heard about this. And I want to give a shout out to the teachers and staff of Hedgesville High School. They had these kids corralled literally over on the soccer field across the street from the high school, and as parents came in to sign them out, it was a well choreographed scenario where you went in, you had to show ID, you signed your child out, they went to the crowd of students, got that student, brought them out to you, and they just kept the flow of cars going in and out of there, and all of them were working in conjunction. It was very well run, and kudos to them, because I know they were cold too. When we talk about leaving, they all left, including the teachers, without coats and stuff. So it was pretty cold out there yesterday. So kudos to them.
Yeah, good point. Joe Ferretti joining us by phone. Joe, good morning.
Good morning, everyone.
In studio with Michael Carl.
Good morning.
And Mr. John Doyle.
Good morning.
In the Larry Schultz seat. And if you're in charge of students, a situation like that is a nightmare scenario, because sure, you're tasked with keeping kids safe, and we all know how difficult that can be in the school. Now you're out in the open, and you mentioned how well coordinated it was for the students, the teachers, and the kids and parents who are coming to pick them up. So salute to everybody on that one.
Absolutely.
All right. So we got to give me a thumbs up or thumbs down on the intros in studio here. We doing them this morning or not? One thumb up from Height. Bill says yes. Carl reluctantly, and Doyle very reluctantly. So I'm going to count that as 2-2. Joe, you're the tiebreaker. Yay or nay?
Go for it.
Go. I'm sorry to the 2 down votes. Those were, I count a reluctant thumbs up as the same as a thumbs down.
It's about the audience. The audience wants this.
Well,
we'll see.
Now that's confidence.
And going and something like this. Hit it.
For the first time since 1977, my Dukes are in the march that is madness, and a feeling comes upon me of nothing but gladness. My Duquesne Dukes survived and advanced, and for the first time since our last win in 1969, Dukes fans danced. Now, these years of 1969 and 1977 tie in with this panelist intro, because there's a name they have in common, and this I will show. In 1969, there was a Nixon in the White House, which was Mike Carl's dream. And the last Duke's appearance in 1977 saw Norm Nixon on the team. Morning, Michael.
There's a connection there.
See? It's a thin one, but it's a connection. He served in the legislature and served in the cabinet, while others in the Capitol saw money and were grabbing it. Now, he just spent his 60 days doing that lobbying thing. And now John Doyle got his, getting paid that lobbying bling. Good morning, Johnny.
I'm not a lawyer, but I occasionally play Larry Schultz on this program.
And you will for the next hour and 10 minutes. He serves in the delegation representing the 92. He got elected without opposition from neither me nor you. And now that it's time to run once again, the Badger finds himself unopposed and won't have to spend. Speaking of the bling. You want to get this guy going, just start talking vaccines, with pro-vaxxers and anti-vaxxers flooding the social media streams. We've covered a few of these interviews, and some have been pretty neat. But only those anti-vaxxers get my friend Joe Ferretti to jump right out of his seat.
Very good.
This day in 1978, we lost a flying Wallenda. Carl lost his footing and his life did enda. You've got to be careful when transversing that rope. It takes a delicate step and a bit of hope. You might be leaning to the left or leaning to the right, but staying in the middle is how you hold tight. There are lessons to be learned in taking a step and a stance. Just be more like Bill Stubblefield and keep your balance. Sorry to the Wellington family. All right, Joe, we go with you to lead off the program as leadoff hitter with issue number 1.
So that was for the audience, right?
That was for somebody. Maybe it's for me.
Rob, we're very familiar with the problems in this country and locally now with political violence. You know, we know about the situations with the Department of Justice actually having the FBI investigate threats against school boards at the request of the National Association of School Boards. We know about certain school board members being threatened, like the young lady in Loudoun County who was called a ugly communist whore in a letter directed to her daughter, who that very daughter was threatened with being killed if her mom didn't get off the school board. We know about the judge who was gunned down outside of his home in Hagerstown. We know about other acts of violence, of course, Nancy Pelosi's husband being beaten with a hammer. Congress actually had to pass a law extending security protection to Supreme Court justices' family members when the Dobbs decision was leaked and people were banging drums and threatening the justices outside their homes in D.C. So we know about all these problems, and we certainly shake our head at the impact that has on our politics. But more importantly, we have to start thinking about the impact it has on our public servants. I was really dismayed to hear earlier this week when you had Pasha Majdi on the show talking about Jefferson County and the fact that he has received death threats, even though he's been serving on the county commission only for a matter of a few months. And I'm also having the thought that the turnover in Jefferson County in some of the public service jobs and the inability to fill those jobs may be linked to the fact that these public servants are subject to these kinds of attacks. There's a prosecution project organization that tracks, it's a national database that tracks alleged perpetrators of political violence going back to 1990. 2021 was the highest number of political threats and acts of violence directed at public servants. It was the highest number ever in this organization's compilation of data regarding these kinds of activities. 9,600 threats against Congress in 2021, 4,500 threats against federal judges, attorneys, and jurors, all leading to the paltry number of 72 federal charges for over 13,000 acts of violence. So my question is, does this activity, does this threat to what I think is a threat to democracy deserve a public policy response on a national and a local level? Mike Height, should our state legislatures start looking at this and developing a real severe penalty criminally for people who are found to have been perpetrators of this kind of activity? I think we need to do it, or we're not going to get good people in office. What does everybody else think?
All right, let's be clear here, Joe. I determine who goes first in answering these questions as the host of the show. We cannot have anarchy by having the person introducing the idea decide who goes first.
But go ahead, Mike.
That's going to completely ruin the. I mean, we might as well just rip up the Constitution and start over. All right, so without any undue influence as to who goes first, go ahead, Mike.
Okay. So the short and quick answer, Joe, is absolutely we need to have legislation and penalties for these kinds of actions. We need to nip this in the bud now, and they need to be strong regulations. The problem I see with this is there's a tendency in some areas not to prosecute when you have these types of incidents. I was surprised, after the Dobbs decision, how many in Congress were silent when the judges were threatened, and somebody was arrested looking like they were going to try to kidnap or something. So I think not just the state legislature, but Congress in general on the federal level needs to speak out against this, and speak out regardless of party, that this is unacceptable behavior, and that there need to be stringent laws put in place to prosecute these individuals, whether they're just, you think, idle threats or not. These individuals need to be prosecuted, and if you prosecute enough of them strongly, it may curb some of this, and hopefully people aren't afraid to run for office.
Mr. Doyle.
Night before last, I attended a presentation at Shepherd University on online hate speech, sponsored by the Bonnie and Bill Stubblefield Center for Civil Political Discourse. 3 very good panelists, probably about, I think it was about 35 people there, all told. And it's interesting. There were a whole lot of good discussion, but nobody seemed to have what is the answer, except I think there was general agreement it needs to be a national solution. It can't be a state-by-state solution. We have to work on this. I don't know what the answer is, but it needs to be Congress.
Billy, you've been called out.
Yeah, it's continuum of problems in various scales. What Joe mentioned was on one end of the scale. There's the other end of the scale is what we see in campaign ads and what we see in hit jobs against the other candidates. Recently, 2 of our candidates for governor have been the victim of what I would call a hit job by a PAC that is associated with another one of the governor candidates. Now, the Supreme Court a few years or so ago gave the PACs quite a bit of latitude, unless they could be shown to be directly working with a candidate. But regardless of how close they are, the result is the same. There's a very significant hit job. Now, it doesn't take very much to move you forward from a political hit job to making some violent threats against individuals. We've got a problem. I don't know how to get around it, but we have a problem.
Mr. Carl.
Well, I think part of the answer is to clearly pass a law at a national level to clearly distinguish between threats of violence and free speech and so forth, and to actually say that threats of violence in the context against public officials or against public programs is a violation of the rights of everybody else, and it's a serious crime. And here's the sentences that follow those kind of threats of violence against that are purportedly based on politics, but really undermine free politics and the rights of everybody else.
Well, there's a different standard for libel and slander when it comes to public figures and elected officials, and perhaps some of this violence is whipped up because if you're told enough things that seem pretty extreme about a person who's running for office, and you believe those things, your gut or visceral reaction might be to overreact. And there's really no downside to making up whatever you want about a public official, because it's pretty tough to be held responsible for it. So, Joe, I'll throw it back to you. Should we, as part of a solution, consider tightening libel and slander laws when it comes to enforcing them against people who do these sorts of things against public officials?
I think we can, but we get into civil remedies with libel and slander, where money damages are paid, as opposed to criminal prosecution for actual threats of violence. So you're looking at a dichotomy here in terms of what kind of response you're going to have. I agree. And we've seen how slander can cost you a lot of money in a New York court. That can be problematic for those who publish false information. But the criminal side of this, I think we need to have public policy support behind, clearly written laws about what you cannot do. And these local prosecutors need to be well funded to be able to prosecute these people, to put a stop to this. I think my Facebook brethren will agree with me that oftentimes when you have candidates on, Rob, and you interview them, sometimes we bemoan the fact that, boy, this person's, really not the kind of person I want to vote for, not politically, but because they just don't seem to have the requisite experience or skill sets to be an effective public servant. And I think the byproduct is that good people are not going to run for office because they're not going to put up with this. They don't want to be subjected to this kind of harangue that they're going to receive on these social media outlets where threats of violence are common. We have to put a stop to that, and I think the investigative arm of the local prosecutors, armed with good, clear state public policy, state laws, will help prosecute these folks, weed them out, and get them out of our national and state discourse.
Anybody else around the room with a final thought before we wrap this one up?
Yeah, Joe, I agree, except I don't know how it's going to be done. You're getting very close to that fine line, free speech and what constitutes free speech.
And you use this new law to define that and make it as clear as possible and enforceable as much. And that's a challenge, but good lawyers can do that.
And there are libel and slander laws on the books already. I don't know why you just can't codify those and bring them into. I don't know why there has to be separate laws for political individuals other than regular individuals. They should be the same standard.
On that note, we'll stop and move on to issue number 2. Mr. Stubblefield, you are on the clock when we come back from our top of the hour break, brought to you in part by the Berkeley County Health Department, their quick response team, the Skinner Accident and Injury Lawyers, SkinnerWins.com, at Hagerstown Ford. This is Talk Radio, WRNR Martinsburg. If you or someone you know suffers from the disease of addiction, help is available from the Berkeley County Quick Response Team with peer recovery coaches and support promptly to the homes of those who've recently experienced an overdose. This collective effort towards recovery brings resources and services to the community, including naloxone and treatment options. Call 304-267-1313 or visit the Berkeley County Recovery Resource Center at 800 Emmett Rouse Drive, Martinsburg. The Berkeley County Quick Response Team is funded through a DHHR grant with the Berkeley-Morgan County Health Department.
With 4 new car dealerships and 4 used car dealerships in 3 states, Parsons is the largest used car and fastest growing new car dealer in the tri-state area. Take Parsons Ford with huge savings on hundreds of new Fords, financing from 0%, Parsons' goal of financing for all, and Parsons' famous above-market trade-in allowances that help make Parsons #1 for used cars too. See why so many won't buy anywhere but Parsons Ford in Martinsburg. We became #1 by making you #1 first. Parsons.
The City of Martinsburg Police Department is now recruiting for new officers to serve the community and to be a part of our team. Starting pay ranges from $53,813 to $70,565 depending on certified experience, with a raise once you're certified and a potential sign-on bonus as well. City of Martinsburg police benefits include health insurance, vacation leave, sick leave, personal time and comp time, a pension plan, paid gym membership, longevity pay, tuition assistance, and a deferred compensation plan. Apply at cityofmartinsburg.org.
Heffley Motor Company off I-81 at 993 Hedgesville Road is a family-owned and operated business providing the Eastern Panhandle with the highest quality pre-owned vehicles and customer service since 1997. Heffley is a pre-owned Carfax Advantage dealer. We're proud to be your partner serving the community. You're local, we're local, so why not buy local? Call us at 304-267-7172 or see us at 993 Hedgesville Road. If you want to sell your car, we buy cars too. Check us out at Heffley.com. The Heffley Motor Company, a nice place to do business.
Panhandle Printing and Design, your local one-stop print shop. We help people manifest their visions, make them come to life. From logos, posters, and window graphics, to banners, business cards, promotional items, car wraps, and more. The options are limitless. One thing's for certain, When you visit Panhandle Printing and Design, you'll be delighted to work with our prompt, professional team as you describe to us what you're looking for. Envision, create, and bring your ideas to life with Panhandle Printing and Design.
My family has run Krause Village stores since 1931. My mom had a stroke and needed help. Hospice of the Panhandle helped my brothers and my sister care for my mom at home. Anything that she needed, we were able to do that by just listening to them and following their training and advice. They were my eyes and ears and helped tremendously during this time. Don't wait to call Hospice of the Panhandle.
Car accident? Get more with Mansion Ferretti. After a car accident, what does it mean when we say get more with Mansion Ferretti?
It means making the insurance company do what's right.
It means getting a powerful local law firm on your side, one with decades of experience.
And it means the peace of mind of never paying us a fee unless we get money for you. So if you've been injured,
get more with Mansion Ferretti. 304-264-8505.
Talk about this clawback provision, and do you have any more knowledge of it since the legislative session ended?
We've been verbally told by the U.S. Department of Education that the work that we've done over the course of the past couple years in terms of funding additional teacher pay raise, service personnel pay raises, putting teachers' aides in classrooms, and some of the other investments that we've made will dramatically exceed the $465 million at issue, is more than sufficient for the federal government's purposes, and that we're all good to go.
Does that news affect the May interims? Will they still need to be a special session?
There will. We left a substantial amount of money unappropriated this year specifically to make certain that we were all clear on that issue, and now we are. So the question becomes, do we want to do any one-time spending on things like infrastructure projects, on one-time capital investments for expenditures in and across state government that don't grow our overall base budget but nevertheless need to be done?
Live from the Talk Radio WRNR studios, it's time for Eastern Panhandle Talk with Rob Mario.
Thank you, Cliff Maxwell. Good morning. Welcome back to the show. Eastern Panhandle Talk is produced by the sports doctor Colin McLaughlin and brought to you in part by the Mansion Ferretti Law Firm, which I could tell you about, or I could let the Ferretti part of that do it himself. Joseph, putting you to work.
Rob, we are located at 408 West King Street in downtown Martinsburg. You can visit us there, or you can visit us on the web at wvjusticelawyers.com if you have any questions about insurance claims, personal injury, or other civil matters.
Well done, sir. Congratulations. You've successfully completed the task assigned. And now we move on with hour number 2 of the show. But before we do that, I want to thank Damon Wright. Yesterday, texted me right after the Duquesne win and congratulated me on the win. Damon, thank you. That shows you've got a good heart and a good soul. None of the people in this room who say they're my friends texted me right afterward, except Bill, who had a little bit of a lag.
Yeah, no, I didn't. A second. I text you while the game's still going on.
That's
about
true.
2 minutes to go in the game. I said, we're going to make it, Rob.
I apologize, Admiral. You are correct.
I didn't know till right now that they'd won. Congratulations.
If I've got to tell you to congratulate me, I'll still accept it, but it'll be with a heavy heart.
In fact, we were talking about shoes toward the tail end because Ron James gave everybody in Duquesne a pair of shoes.
And Carl just keeps shooting me dirty looks, saying, I don't care about this. Move on to the St. Louis Cardinals. That's what really matters. All right, we go to issue number 2. Admiral, you're on the clock.
Yeah, Rob. About 10 years or so ago, the Republicans took over the majority of the legislators, and one of their principal platforms at the time, and remains a principal platform today, is flatline budget. They were very aggressive in pursuing the flatline budget. I think it's paid real dividends to the state. Our bond rating's good. We have a very healthy rainy day fund, which we did not have before. So there's a lot of positives that came out of this 10 years plus of consistent flatline budget. My question to my fellow panelists, though, is it time to back off somewhat? Because certain things are being left behind. We've heard quite a bit about Child Protective Service. We had one of the legislators on this past week talking about foster family, and he admitted that flatline budget is getting in the way of taking care of some of the foster parent program. We've with the SROs in schools, a hardening of schools, the teachers. There's a whole litany of things that could use an influx of money, but it's always, we cannot do it. We're going to stick with a flatline budget. It plays well for political purposes, and I yield to that, and it is played very well for the economic health of our state. But is it time to back off some and to look at some of these needs that have not been addressed in the recent past?
All right, Mr. Doyle, you had your hand up first.
I rise on a point of personal privilege.
I don't even know what that means, but it sounds important.
We fixed the budget problem when I was a member of the House of Delegates, vice chair of the Finance Committee, and later for 3 years deputy secretary of Revenue under Governor Tomlin. We got a big rainy day fund then. We solved the workers' comp problem, the unfunded liability in the retirement systems, except for the teachers' retirement system, because that was so big we had to set it on a 20-year track. We did all kinds of things like that. So I do not accept that the actions, some of which I agree with, which were taken by the Republicans beginning 10 years ago, had anything to do with the good bond rating and stuff like that. We actually got our bond rating up where one of them became AAA while I was still Deputy Secretary of Revenue. I just wanted that on the record, folks. A flatline budget.
John, since you're a candidate for office, that announcement will cost you $300 in advertising, because I think you covered about 2 minutes there.
I got a quarter.
At $150 a minute.
Yeah, believe me, you'll get a bill.
Joe, do we really want to get into a competition on billable hours with
you? A flatline budget is, in effect, cutting the budget each time. And if that's what you want to do, fine. I disagree. I think we need to have higher salaries for public school teachers and state troopers and corrections officers and all kinds of other things in order to remain competitive or become competitive, really, with our neighboring states. You really can't do that on a flatline budget. It's a policy decision. You know, I, being on certainly to the left of center, would say that we need to do the things that the public, through its elected representatives, have said they want the government to do, and do it right. So my answer is no, Bill. But again, it's a policy question.
I got another delegate in the room here, and Michael Haidt. Mr. Haidt.
Yeah, I don't think the Democrats want to run on fiscal policy. I remember the budget was in the red when we took over. So
that was not true, Mike.
Well, actually was. So
no, it wasn't.
So I wouldn't run on that. So I believe the flatline budget has helped. It has, and I believe what it has done is tried to flush out the places in the budget that were too bloated, and has tried to right-size government. And what we're seeing now are those areas that do need additional help, but we have constrained the growth of the ones that didn't, and tried to keep the government from getting too bloated. So you can look at the corrections issues, you can look at CPS issues, you can look at the waiver IDD, ADW issues that we're seeing right now and see that they're in crisis, and know that we need to grow those line items and we need to put more money into those areas, but we don't need to grow the whole budget as a whole, which is what was happening before. And that flatline budget, I believe, was put into place because I think the Republican Party had a vision to give money back to the people through tax cuts, personal property tax cuts, income tax cuts, so on and so forth. And I think that they needed to have a flatline budget for a period of years in order to see where the true needs were. And I think that's what they're seeing now. You bring up a great point, Bill, that there are those issues, the CPS issues, the ones that I have already mentioned. Those were true needs, and we need to grow the budget in those areas. However, I believe the budget was growing in all areas before. And if you actually sit down and take a look at the budget, and I know John has, there are a lot of places within the budget where money is sort of hidden, you know, where there might be a line item that has several hundred millions of dollars in a line item, but it's not broken down. So you sort of wonder, where's the money being spent in there? And I think that's what this current legislature has tried to do with the budget, sort of break it down, make sure money is going to where money is actually needed. And I think we're accomplishing that. It has been good, but we do need to start growing it in certain areas.
Mr. Carl.
The budget has never been in the red, Mike.
Well, we're going to pick up on that in a moment, but first I want to go around the room. Mike?
And in fact, it has in terms of real economics, but that's another story. I agree with Bill and Mike very, very much, and totally disagree with John and his painting of the management of how great the Democrats were. That's why they're out now. But I think that we need to continue to look for waste, but at the same time, look for needed expenditures, and not have a flat budget as a goal in and of itself, but to make that approach those things, fill real needs, but continue to cut the continued waste that's in state government without a doubt.
Mr. Ferretti.
Well, I'll citing a statistic that I was able to get from Mike Carl's friends at the West Virginia Center for Budget and Policy. The state budget, adjusted for inflation, is 13% less today than it was in 2018. 13%. That's a cut. That's a real cut, adjusted for inflation. So I understand Mike Height's points, and I agree to some extent. Yeah, we needed a top to bottom review of the state budget and see where we're wasting money. But you can squeeze only so much before the bad stuff starts coming out the other end. And now we've got situations where you can call into question the safety or the lack of safety that exists in some of the state-run nursing homes, such as that horrible situation with that man who was burned to death in a hot tub because of a malfunctioning temperature gauge. Right away, we started hearing reports about, well, there's inadequate nursing, and the nurses that we have there aren't qualified to do the jobs we're asking them to do. Well, that's all going back to budgetary constraints. We can't hire good people. We can't pay them what they deserve to be paid. And we have situations now where the residents of some of these nursing homes are unsafe, clearly. And that's just one example of some of the bad stuff that comes when you squeeze too hard. So I think the legislature has a fine line to walk, and I think they have to be careful. And I'm glad to hear Mike Height say that they understand that they're underfunded in some of these state agencies, and they're going to need to remedy that.
Billy?
Yeah, my question was looking ahead as opposed to looking back, and I think Mike Height was looking ahead, so I appreciate that. So
now, in regards to whether or not the budget was in the red or not, obviously the state has to have a balanced budget every year. That's the law. But there have been times when the state has not had enough money. They've had to come back in and cut in the second half of the year when the Democrats were in control. And when Governor Justice took over, he had the famous sick patient press conference, State of the Union, where he announced $450–500 million in tax increases because he had to cover budget shortfalls. I think that's what Mr. Carl and Mr. Height were talking about, Mr. Doyle. Can you address those charges?
Yeah, sure. First of all, that I suspected that to begin with, and it's funny. The next year, without a whole lot of changes, they came back and said we got this huge surplus. So I'm wondering exactly, where he got those numbers. But here's the deal. What happened was, and it was in the last 2 years of Governor Tomlin's term when I was Deputy Secretary of Revenue, all of a sudden, natural gas revenues just plummeted through the floor. And we did have to make an adjustment because of that. My old friend, bless his soul now, Bob Kiss, was Secretary of Revenue. He's the guy who hired me. We all got together and say, how are we going to handle this? And yeah, Governor Tomlin proposed some cuts that the then Republican, barely controlled legislature didn't go through on. So I do think both parties are complicit in that, although in fairness, it was something that just hit us right out of the blue, and it took some thought to figure out how to handle it. That's really what happened.
Mr. Carl, Mr. Height, are you satisfied with Mr. Doyle's witness testimony?
It's what I expected.
Never let facts get in the way of a good point.
Those are facts, Mike.
Issue number 3, Mr. Height.
All right, let's stay with state politics. And Governor Justice has just vetoed one of the bills that came out of the legislature, has hinted at others. So considering his lame duck status, do you think that the legislature may override his vetoes?
How are they going to do that? I mean, if he has to, the only way they're going to
John, the proper way to do this is I call on you to answer the question again. Where there seems to be a mutiny aboard the program today.
Democracy.
Insurrections are being led here.
Democracy.
Now, I'm not going to reward your bad behavior, John. Instead, I'm going to go to the person who sat there patiently awaiting his turn, Mr. Stubblefield. And you get a 2-minute timeout.
At this stage, I don't believe, Mike, there's going to be any pushback or any repercussions if the legislators jump in and override the veto. I don't think any of the issues are so burning in the soul of the people that it's going to stir up a significant reaction. I think this gives the governor quite a bit of latitude. I think it gives the legislators quite a bit of latitude. There could be other issues. Let's say if an abortion issue was an issue or Second Amendment was an issue, then it probably would have some repercussions. But the ones in front of the governor at this point in time, I do not think generates that much emotion.
Mr. Carl.
Well, I think the governor's relationship with the legislative leadership is pretty shaky, so I could see some vetoes being overridden.
And he has that lame duck status.
Excuse me, that's not the question I thought Mike was asking. I thought there's going to be some repercussion should they override the veto.
Oh, well, and I to that question, I would say no.
Mr. Height, a clarification.
Well, do you think they'll override the veto?
That's a different story. Yeah. Because all it takes is majority. Is that correct?
Well, yes, but they would have to call themselves back in to override the veto.
But that would be a very simple thing to do. They've already voted once to pass the legislation, so unless they're indebted to the governor, there'd be no reason not to override.
And the other part of the question that probably didn't come out is we're getting ready to go back into special session. So the governor's going to call us back, and he's going to put some issues on the call, and it has to do with the budget. So, would overriding a veto cause enough friction there that the legislature wouldn't get what they wanted either? So I think you have to be careful.
The one that might perhaps fall in this category, Mike, would be the vaccine bill, because there has been a significant pushback, if you will, or at least a campaign by the doctors and the pediatricians especially in saying that it was a bad law. And I suspect the governor's going to veto that, and that particular one, some legislators may change their mind because of the reaction of the doctors.
Bill, considering your misunderstanding of the question, I'm now regretting my decision to lead off with you instead of Mr. Doyle. I didn't call your name yet, Mr. Doyle. You're still in timeout. Mr. Ferretti.
Well, Mike, the only veto I'm aware of was the veto of the money that was directed towards the Rockefeller Neuroscience Institute, which was a paltry sum, I think, that came out of the legislature. Wasn't it a couple $1 million?
$2 million.
$2 million, yep. But I also think that the Senate put in $4 million for something else that went to.
But the reports now coming. Yeah, the reports coming out of the governor's office is that he vetoed it because you all didn't include $100 million that the governor wanted for rural health initiatives, which, I mean, I just put my hands in the air because I think this is a little embarrassing to have 60 Minutes do 2 segments on the advances in medicine that are taking place up there at WVU, and for the legislature, which I applauded, to send some money their way to help with that research, and for the governor to nix that whole thing, I thought was embarrassing. And I hope that that's remedied. I hope that you guys will override that veto and get that money to those folks.
When we had Speaker Hanshaw on, he made it sound like it was a bit more of a technical issue than it was a serious threat to the money, and that this money would flow to WVU in a timely fashion.
Well, I think that may be on the call. That particular issue may be on the call again, and maybe if we adjust the language of the bill, that he won't veto it.
Now, he's been patiently waiting after serving his time in the penalty box, Mr. Doyle.
Not patiently. He's been on the edge of his chair.
I was trying to be kind. I was.
Well,
the fidgety Mr. Doyle will now answer.
The reason I ask how they're going to do it is, in order to call yourselves into special session, Mike, you got to have, it's my understanding, 60% of each house that sign a paper to come back in. So it's more than just a simple majority to do an override. If you can't do that, and I can see some people simply not signing it because they don't want to come back in. It's not that they don't want to override, they just don't want to come back in. So I think that's iffy. And so that leaves a special session called by the governor, and the governor writes the call, and unless the governor puts something on the call, the legislature can't act on it. So if the governor chooses to not put on the call overrides of my vetoes, which I suspect he would not do, I don't think anything's going to be overridden. So, yeah, that's why I said, how in the world are they going to do it?
Comes back to you, Michael.
Well, couldn't they call themselves back in right after he calls them back in? So they're coming in anyway. So you go in for a special session or whatever. He makes the call, and you call yourselves back in for the override, a veto override, if you so desire to do that.
You could do that. In other words, you adjourn the special extraordinary session, sine die, which is the correct pronunciation of the N words, and then you call yourselves back into a special general session, which is what you have when the legislature calls itself into session. And remember, in a special general session, anybody can introduce a bill about anything. It's just like the regular session. And that's why some of them are not going to want to come in there, because there are some people that oppose some of the bills that came very close to passing but didn't, and they don't want those bills to pass. So it's more than just the specific overrides that are factoring in here.
Mr. Hornby texted me and said that the governor's issue was with the $4 million, not the $2 million, when the Speaker Henshaw was on the program. That's what he said. The $2 million would eventually get there, like we just discussed a moment ago. And he also did say, Joe again gets it wrong, Mr. Ferretti. Mr. Hornby, I would caution you, Mr. Ferretti is a loyal advertiser.
Was.
Another phone call we got to have with Mike Hornby. Unbelievable.
You must have done something to scrape Hornby, because the last 2 weeks he's been all over you, dude.
Well, I know I pay my bill every month.
That ought to be enough.
You would think, right? And it is greatly appreciated. Anything else on that topic before we go to the halftime break?
Nope, moving on.
We are good then. And that would put Mr. Doyle on the clock. Yeah, with issue number 4. And this segment of our program today brought to you in part by Elder Care attorney Danny Staggers, also by CMA Honda, and by Larry DeMarco and Company at Century 21 Modern Realty Results. Born on this day, 1920, James Brown.
Get up off of that thing and dance to you. Sing it now. Get up off of that thing.
Hi, Crescia Hornby here. Larry DeMarco, broker of Modern Realty Results, believes he has some of the best real estate agents in the Eastern Panhandle. Agents at Modern Realty Results have years of experience and knowledge of the local real estate market. Agents within the office work as a team to provide quality customer service. We strive to always ensure client satisfaction through handling every transaction with honesty and integrity, all while offering competitive rates. Modern Realty Results is veteran-owned and managed. Please call us at 262-4222, modernrealtyresults.com.
At Carter Myers Automotive, what we do today will tomorrow become what we've done. That's why Owners Just Do More no longer defines us. Our work is never done because what we live by doesn't have a finish line. We care. Our company of owners is moving lives forward every day by finding more ways to care before, during, and after your purchase. Because when you're happy, so are we. Carter Myers Automotive. Proud to be the owners who just care more.
Joe Biden is destroying our country. Help Trump take it back with Trump conservative Chris Miller for governor. West Virginia business leader, job creator, outsider.
I'm Chris Miller. I'll run government like a business. I'll audit every dime and drug test everyone in the welfare system. Not a dime of your money should ever wind up in a drug dealer's pocket.
Chris Miller, pro-life, pro-gun, Christian husband and father. Chris Miller will keep boys out of girls' sports, but he won't stop there. Miller says, hold the child abusers who perform those surgeries accountable.
They're practicing mutilation, not medicine, and they should be in prison.
Protect our kids. Keep woke out of West Virginia. That's Chris Miller's plan.
Banning critical race theory is a start, but let's require schools to teach patriotism from a young age.
Chris Miller, patriot, conservative, pro-Trump business leader for governor. Paid for by Miller for Governor.
The WVU Heart and Vascular Institute is pleased to announce that thoracic surgery with Dr. Shalini Reddy is now available in Martinsburg at WVU Medicine Berkeley Medical Center. Dr. Reddy has practiced thoracic surgery in the region for over 8 years and offers robotic laparoscopic surgeries for the lungs, esophagus, and more. For more information about thoracic surgery in Martinsburg, check us out online at mywvuheart.com.
Do you have someone in a nursing home, or are you worried about somebody you love going into a nursing home? The law firm of Daniel Staggers can protect your assets. Call the law firm of Daniel Staggers today at 304-267-3915. The Daniel Staggers Law Firm does elder care law, estate planning, and special needs trusts for disabled children and family members. Visit the Daniel Staggers Law Firm for your initial free consultation at 133 East John Street in Martinsburg. The Daniel Staggers Law Firm, when you need asset protection for you or for a family member. This segment of our program today brought to you in part by the Wagner Law Firm, West Virginia's premier DUI defense attorneys. Also by the committee to re-elect Craig Blair to the state senate. James Brown, born this date 1920, shares a birthday in the exact same year with Werner Klemperer, who was, of course, Colonel Klink on Hogan's Heroes. If you ever read about the cast of Hogan's Heroes, they endured a lot of criticism for doing a show that made Nazis look a little bit cuddly and funny. And many of the cast members of Hogan's Heroes were themselves or had family members who suffered under Nazi Germany. So it's interesting if you ever read moment to read about those cast members.
I watched that a lot. I don't know that I would ever consider them nice and cuddly. They did make them look really stupid at times. So
they at all times.
Yeah. At all times.
Yeah.
So,
even their attack dogs, the German Shepherds.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Well, it just goes to show when you feed the dogs well, they tend
They're
to
your
like
friend.
you.
They are your friend. Yeah. I have two neighbors in my cul-de-sac who are canine officers. One's with the Secret Service, and the other one is Capitol Hill Police. And you can't go near their canine dogs. You don't. Yeah. That's the family can, but everybody else stay away. You're not allowed to socialize with them. All right, issue number 4, Mr. Doyle.
And before I do that, in Hogan's Heroes, my favorite character was Sergeant Schultz, played by John Banner.
Indeed, yeah. Everybody loves Sergeant Schultz.
Yeah. Anyway, yesterday, the U.S. Department of Justice filed suit against Apple for combination and restraint of trade, interfering with competition. And the situation is this. If you have an Apple computer and an Apple iPhone and an Apple wristwatch or whatever else, Apple makes it more difficult for you to communicate with someone who is on a non-Apple platform, say an Android or that sort of thing. To me, and what they're arguing is that this is vertical integration, like you've had, say, in Japan, where if you're going to a particular industry, you got to you have to purchase from all elements of that industry up and down the line, as opposed to picking and choosing. And I remember when I was in Ireland and Britain about 50 years ago, taverns would be lined up with certain distributors, and you could get only only one kind of ale, only one kind of lager, only one kind of stout, that sort of stuff. It is less competition than we're accustomed to here in the United States, where you can buy one type of product from one company and then a similar but a different one. Whereas I can buy a Westinghouse refrigerator and an Amana stove if I want to. This is the thing, and this reminds me. It is an interesting question of just exactly what is or is not interfering with competition. It reminds me of back in the late 1800s in this country, where you had similar kind of situations, what were called trusts. You had the Sugar Trust and the Railroad Trust and all this kind of stuff. And Teddy Roosevelt comes into office and breaks them all up in the interest of competition in the economy. So my question to the group is, which is the best way to achieve true competition in the economy?
And a note, Justice Department officials said if the government wins its case against Apple, they could break up one of the world's largest companies. So this case has far-reaching implications here.
Just like Teddy Roosevelt broke up some companies.
Indeed.
Or just like AT&T or Esso a few years ago.
Yeah. Mr. Carr, let's go with you here, sir.
Well, I will say that this just manifests the potential tyranny of high technology that I'm very skeptical about, and so I'm not totally against this effort by the Justice Department to probe into is this real old-fashioned competition, or are they manipulating the system and have such control of the system that it is subject to antitrust, violation. So I think it's not okay to probe into it, because we're in a different world than we were when you could have a stove from someone and a refrigerator from somebody else.
Yeah. We'll stay on the attorneys here and go with you, Joe Ferretti.
Well, Mike, I was interested in what you were going to say, and I agree with you. I thought you might take the anti-government stance, though, that the Department of Justice shouldn't be interfering with what is a wildly successful company that has a product that's ubiquitous. Everybody has an iPhone, or if you don't, and I guess a few have Android phones out there too, the Samsung phones and things like that. But what the Department of Justice is going to look into, in part, is that all these apps that are being developed, Apple was putting their thumb on the scale here and making sure that a lot of these apps are only compatible with iPhones. So even the app developers, which are independent businesses, are under the Apple thumb and are constrained in how and where they can have their app available. So it is quite a problem when a company this successful is able to really drive the market. And as we've learned in years past with other very successful companies, sometimes the government has to step in and level the playing field. And I suspect to some degree that will happen here.
Let me throw out some stats here as I just Googled the market share. As of early 2024, Android has a 70.69% market share worldwide. So 7 out of 10 phones use the Android operating system. In the United States, iPhones have about 61% of the share. More than 1 billion iPhones and over 3 billion Android devices are currently active, and Android smartphones accounted for 56% of all smartphone sales worldwide in the fourth quarter of 2023. So it's hardly like Apple is dominating the market where they've got 90% of the market. In fact, they have sub 50% of the market worldwide. In fact, less than 30% of the market worldwide uses iPhones. So anyway, Mr. Height.
Well, I think it gets down to, like Joe said, the apps. And if you're creating apps, or if you're putting pressure on the independent app makers to make apps only compatible on Apple, then there is a problem. And I think what the government's doing here is investigating and trying to make sure that there isn't a monopoly in the making, and that they aren't violating antitrust laws that have been good for competition in the past. Several people have brought up, we've broken up companies before, Ma Bell, a lot of these different ones, and has created competition, has been good for Americans and people around the world. So the other thing I find interesting about this is these tech giants tend to be, on the political scale, more to the left. And I find it interesting to see that this is the Biden administration that is going after one of these tech giants that has typically been supportive of the left and the Biden agenda. So I find that a whole lot more intriguing than the whole lawsuit itself.
Billy?
Yeah, I'm not sure I can answer the question, John. I don't know enough about it yet. I do know there are examples in other areas that the company has somewhat of a monopoly. Tesla did that with its charging station.
Yeah, how is this fundamentally different?
I don't think it is fundamentally different. Now, in Tesla's case, because of the market pressures, because of big bucks, they're going to extend their charging to other car manufacturers. But that was not from a lawsuit. That was because of pure economics. And the numbers you gave, Rob, strike me as they're trying to find a problem because the problem doesn't really exist. If 61% in the U.S. Use other than Apple products, and worldwide something like 70% use something other than Apple products, then we don't really have a problem. I'm not sure what's driving this.
No, I think he said in the U.S. the big majority is Apple. The 61% is Apple.
That's exactly. No, that's. I thought that's the point I was making.
Oh.
And then world said,
okay.
61% is Apple.
61% U.S. use iPhones, but worldwide 71% use Android.
Yeah.
Right? And so how is this fundamentally different than you buy a computer? We've all been through this, where the plug you use for your computer now doesn't match the plug that you used for your computer, the next computer that you buy, or the printer doesn't match. You've got to buy an adapter of some sort. I mean, why should one product be made to fit all products when that's not consistent across all consumer categories?
An example even more onerous, if you read books online, if you try to buy a Kindle book, that is for Apple, you cannot buy it on Amazon. You can, but you have to go through all sorts of back doors. Each one of these companies have barriers that would encourage you to use their product.
Right.
And no, I think that's important. That's why I brought it up. I don't know the answer. I don't know if it is the right thing to do, but because it happened yesterday, and I think whatever a court decides is going to affect how we all live. I just thought I'd bring it up here. So, yeah, I'm agnostic on the result here. I think I find myself somewhere close to Carl here on this. It's probably important to find out. But I don't know what the result ought to be.
If I buy a Ford, am I going to sue because I can't use GM parts in my Ford?
Ford
has its own system, right? Its own ecosystem of cars.
And what I was about to say, I am not going to say.
You were going to curse at me.
No, because Hornby's going to charge me for an advertisement, so I'm not going to say it.
The giant thumb of the man has oppressed John Doyle. The man has rubbed them out. All right, we move on to issue number 5, and for that, Mr. Carl, the senior member of our crew.
Since we don't have a lot of time,
we got time.
Give a short one here.
We got 14 minutes.
Oh, okay. I'm throwing out a question. Is there a shred of evidence supporting the payment of millions of dollars to Hunter Biden and his other, relatives, other than improper influence peddling? Have they proven that they've delivered any value to these foreign, in some cases, governments or interests that would merit millions of dollars of payments other than influence peddling?
Mr. Doyle, go ahead.
The bottom line is nobody's proven anything. And
they haven't proven that there's any value in millions of dollars of value of what they've delivered. And if they were, we would have heard about it.
Nobody has a shred of evidence that Joe Biden did anything wrong. If they would have produced it.
He has done everything wrong by enabling this. That's what I'm saying.
That's not been proven.
It's absolutely proven.
Has not been.
There's no proof against it, John.
Well,
not a shred of proof against it.
Well, let's back up. Let's back up here. Mike, what's the proof for it?
the proof is that there's been millions of dollars paid to Hunter and other family members by foreign governments and foreign interests, and there is nothing to justify it other than that their last name is Biden.
But is there any proof that Joe Biden was involved in this transaction?
He has enabled it. There's absolute
Where's the proof
that he knew about it. That has been proven absolutely that he knew that the money was coming in and he was being called.
But there's no proof he did anything about it. There's no proof of his
other
involvement.
Than say okay.
No, there's no proof he said okay.
Well, you got.
I mean, if you think that's a legitimate defense of Joe Biden enabling this, I'm
He
sorry.
didn't.
We have different values.
There's no proof he enabled anything.
It's absolutely proven that he enabled it because he knew about it, and
No.
if he knew that they delivered important reports and analysis and other things of legitimate independent value, he would be saying it right now. His silence proves that it was just influence peddling.
There's not a shred of evidence that he did anything wrong.
All right, so the theme has remained the same. Yes, there is. No, there isn't.
Did anything wrong as a corrupt Democrat. I agree with that.
All right, Bill, you've been sitting there smiling while those two have been spitting at each other across from you.
I have the luxury or the benefit of visiting with Mike Carl every Thursday over breakfast, so this is not new to me. I have plenty of time to prepare my argument. Mike, yesterday on the Hill, there was testimony by Comer, the delegate, the representative from Kentucky, that's looking into potential impeachment charges against Joe Biden. And one of the witnesses they had was one of the individuals they thought would be a friendly witness to the Republicans. He has some knowledge of what went on, and his testimony yesterday was all the charges that we're hearing against Biden, against Hunter Biden, was generated by Russian influence or Russian means. I'm not going to say that is true or not, but your argument is there any proof one way or the other? A lot of the evidence of what Comer's trying to find is crumbling in his hands.
Mr. Haidt.
Yeah, I don't know that I buy that. The facts are that Hunter Biden and Biden family members received a lot of money from foreign entities. And what was it for? Whether it was Burisma or whatever, what was it for? Obviously, Hunter Biden is no genius when it comes to energy, so what were they paying him for? What was the money for? And that's where you have to be open-minded, John, and I think that the Democratic Party is being very close-minded about this and saying to themselves, there's no evidence, there's no evidence, there's no evidence, when it's very easy to see that there were millions and millions of dollars being funneled into the Biden family for what other reason? Other than access to then Vice President and now President Biden. Now, you can say Joe Biden, the president or vice president, had no knowledge of any of this. You can say that. But any objective person looks at this whole scenario and says there is corruption as deep as it possibly can go. If this were the other side, you would be incensed as Mr. Carl is.
I don't know about that. That's a pretty tough level to reach.
No, actually, if I could get in, Micah,
absolutely.
It is very similar, I think, to the accusations about the Trump family because of the billions of dollars invested in Donnie Jr. and Kushner by the Saudi Arabian government. One could say, what other reason do they do? The point is, there isn't any proof that has influenced Donald Trump. I have my problems with Donald Trump, but there's no hard evidence that there's a direct influence there.
Yes,
Surely Donald
absolutely.
Trump knew about what his children were doing. There's one thing, if you know about something, it's one thing. If you participate in it, it's something else. There is no evidence that Joe Biden participated in any of
John,
this.
I love when you can't see the difference between the Biden family business and the Trump family business. The Trump family business that has been doing business with foreign entities for years, decades, and having money flow in for decades from foreign entities. And the Biden family, who had no business, I don't even know what their business is other than to collect money. So there's a huge difference between Biden family interests with foreign entities and Trump family interests with foreign entities. Don't push away the Biden issues by bringing in Trump.
I'm not pushing it. What I'm saying is, in each case, what I'm saying is, in each case, there is no evidence. And if you're going to say somebody's a crook, you got to prove it. Now, Mike Carl seems to think I don't think any Democrats are crooks. I do. Bob Menendez, clearly, they got proof he's a crook. The gold bars are about as hard evidence as you can get on anybody. But no, you haven't found anything about Biden.
Are we? If it's a court of public opinion, that's one standard. But if it's a court of law, that's another standard. You're an attorney. You understand that better than anybody else. Mike, are you saying that in a court of law there should be no doubt, or a court of public opinion?
I say in the court of public opinion there should be no question.
Different standard.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that Joe Biden took one step, on a specific policy or action, to earn these payments. I'm saying on the face of it, on every facts we do know, the facts are there are millions went, and that's known to the Biden people, as Mike said, and there's not a shred of evidence to justify it other than that their last name was Biden.
Influence peddling, effectively.
Exactly.
All right, Joe Ferretti via telephone, another attorney in the room here.
Well, I hate to engage in whataboutism, but my gosh, Mike Haidt, the vapor trail transporting the Trumps out of Washington, D.C. hadn't dissipated out of the sky yet, and Jared Kushner was getting $2 billion from the Saudis. If the test is, as Mike Carl says, on the face of it, that looks pretty rotten. But back to the point that Mike Carl's making, did the Bidens, Hunter Biden and James Biden, who both, I think, are questionable characters, did they trade on the name? Sure. Were they able to sucker some people overseas to give them a bunch of money in the hopes of maybe influencing American public policy? Perhaps. You can't ascribe any other motive to why some of that money went to the Biden. So, yeah, I can accept all that. Does this have anything to do with actual change in policy or influencing over a vice president who then became a private citizen, who then became president? I don't know. That connection has not been drawn. And I don't think it's the standard that we require the Bidens to prove their innocence. I think the standard is to require a prosecution to prove their guilt. And that hasn't happened yet.
In the court of public policy, that is the rule. And anybody who doesn't see it, and I appreciate your objectivity in what you just said, but I'm not talking about that there's any legal action, including impeachment, against Joe Biden. I'm just saying he's proven to be a corrupt influence peddler.
At least he has, in your eyes.
He's enabled millions of dollars to flow to his family because of his name without delivering any real value to the people paying it. And I agree with Ferretti's analysis. Of what we have and what's proven, but there's enough proven for the court of public opinion to reject re-election of Joe Biden.
My issue with these scenarios as they play out in every administration is that they become a big production which gets everybody fired up in their own base so that hopefully they can generate some political contributions. But in the end, nobody goes to jail, nobody loses an office, and there's always some underling simp in the middle along the way who gets put in jail and fined as the scapegoat, who is not a power broker, is just somebody that they sacrificed to the lions, right?
Hey.
And that's how these things always end. The investigations of, Nixon was the last one, right? That's the last time somebody actually had a consequence. Good.
Well, I was going to say the Hardin administration, the Teapot Dome. Some folks went to jail then.
Yeah.
I read about it, Rob.
I remember Burt Lance and Billy Carter in the Jimmy Carter administration. Mm-hmm. Now, a whole lot of Republicans think Jimmy Carter was not a good president. They might be right, but nobody ever suspected Jimmy Carter of being a crook. But Billy and Burt were pretty shady.
Billy was just trying to capitalize on that beer. Remember Billy Beer?
Right, Billy Beer.
Yep.
Billy Beer? Right. Hey, Delegate Paul Espinosa, the Speaker Pro Tem, during the program, as we were discussing the situation with the $2 million earlier and the veto that you had talked about, Mike Carl, once the legislature has adjourned, sine die, or John, how do you pronounce it correctly?
Sine die.
Thank you. There is no opportunity to override the governor's veto. We'd have to call ourselves into special session, repass the bill, and then remain in session until he acts on the bill.
That's exactly what John Doyle said. That's how he laid it out a while ago.
Yeah, so, well, you have agreement. Mm-hmm. All right. Okay, we've got a minute left. I need, right now, your picks officially for who wins the NCAA basketball tournament. Mike Height, who do you have?
I'm going to say Duke, just because it's going to piss off Carl.
Mike Carl.
Yeah, I can hardly react. I'm going to say Texas.
Texas, Bill Stubblefield.
I think it may be Connecticut, but I hope it's Purdue.
John Doyle.
Go Marshall women against Virginia Tech today at 3:30, led by Abby Beeman, the best point guard in Shepherd history.
Yeah, but no pick for the men's tournament as to who wins it all?
I have no idea.
All right, Mr. Ferretti.
The Duquesne Dukes bring back the era of Joey Meyer, B.B. Flannery, Bruce Atkins, names you're all familiar with, Rob.
I am, actually, yes, including Pat Farrell, who was one of the point guards back when I was there. He was on the freshman wing of the dorm with me when I was a wee pup. Way back then. Final thoughts, 8 seconds apiece. You get to get your final thought out next.
Finally, West Virginia is moving in the right direction. As your West Virginia Senate President, Craig Blair has passed the most conservative legislative agenda in the nation. He has fought for our values like banning elective abortions, protecting our Second Amendment rights, and prevented boys from playing in girls' sports. Senator Craig Blair championed the largest tax cut in the history of our state. Craig Blair, a strong conservative leader. Promises made, promises kept. This election, vote for Republican Craig Blair for State Senate. Paid for by the Committee to Re-elect Craig Blair.
Hey, it's Cody from Cody's Auto Body.
You're a potty mouth.
But we do a really great job fixing cars after an accident.
I know, but you're still a potty mouth.
I'm possibly the best friend you could ever have.
You are, but potty mouth.
If you need your car repaired, come to Cody's Auto Body, located at 851 Wilson Street in Martinsburg. Because that's Cody's with a T for f***ing trust.
See? Potty mouth.
Leave me alone.
I do.
We got double the Rock's gas rewards, 6 cents off a gallon.
I can't believe you didn't fill up.
That's double my rent. Not my car.
Save now with double the gas discount. 6 cents off a gallon with Rock's Rewards.
We got double the Rock's gas rewards, 6 cents off a gallon.
You had one job.
It's twin girls.
Save now with double the gas discount. 6 cents off a gallon with Rock's Rewards.
A DUI arrest can have a devastating impact on one's life, your job, your driver's license, and in some cases your very freedom. My name is Harley Wagner. I own and operate West Virginia's only exclusive DUI defense firm. Since 1999, I've been representing citizens throughout the Eastern Panhandle and state of West Virginia charged with DUI. Let my years of training and experience work for you.
The initial consultation is free at the Wagner Law Firm in Martinsburg. Phone 304-901-7400 or online at westvirginiaduilawyers.com.
Final thoughts. We start with you on the phone, Joe Ferretti.
For my good friend Michael Hornby, I recommend the book by Henry Fairley, Biting the Hand That Feeds You.
Very nice. Mr. Doyle.
Once again, go Marshall women beat Virginia Tech.
Mr. Stubblefield.
Enjoy March Madness.
Mr. Carl.
The only Duke still left is okay.
All right, thank you. I appreciate that. Mr. Height.
I'll be out next week touring the country. So happy trails.
Oh, I didn't know that. Have a good time, man. Hey, it's 10 o'clock. Dave Ramsey Show is next. This is Talk Radio, WRR Martinsburg and TV 10, and we'll talk to you again in 70 short hours.